Well, good morning, y'all. Thanks for being here. As you can tell, I'm a Southerner because I said good morning, y'all. So we'll introduce ourselves, and then since we're a small group, we'll have everybody introduce themselves too and where they're from. My name's Rebecca Kennedy. Everybody knows me as Becky. I've been at Baylor for a little over 28 years now. It's hard to believe. I started when I was 16. So thank you. Students don't laugh at that joke. So I'm with my people now. But I'm kind of been working up the ranks for those years, and I'm assistant dean now for spiritual life. But I mainly oversee the Department of Mission Service and Public Life, which is what I'm doing here with these two guys over here. And speaking of, I'm going to turn it over to Bo and let him introduce himself.
So my name is Bo. I'll get this out of the way. It is my real first name, not a nickname.
And he's not from the South. When I first met him, that's what I asked.
Wow.
But.
So I actually grew up west of Chicago and came to Baylor from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I've been here almost 10 years. And I oversee all 4-credit study abroad, exchange, partnerships with universities, and stuff like that. But everything we do, so this is the funny part, this is what I joke that they don't let us do the tours because we constantly are trying to get people to leave the country to go abroad.
I'm Andy Hogue. I serve as Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences at Baylor, and oversee the Office of Engaged Learning, which does a lot of sort of engagement with the world beyond Baylor. We're in the business of helping students learn and serve beyond the classroom, and so that is local, that is global, that is everywhere in between, and which means I get to work with these two on a lot of things, and we'll talk a bit about what that means and some of the ways that we try to bring some alignment. We work in different spaces across a university, and so that means that we try to align our efforts in ways that we hope are beneficial to our students, but also to the world around us. So, and we thought maybe by way of starting, if we could just sort of have everybody introduce themselves, and that way we can get a sense of who all's in the room. And again, we're hoping this will be conversational as much as anything. So could we start here?
Yes. I'm Brooke Quinlan. My husband Mike and I just moved to Waco a couple of months ago from Indonesia, where we've been serving with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship for 11 years. And the CBF has asked us to come to Waco to work with students who are interested in going overseas in missions and ministry. So maybe you three would be some people for us to talk to.
Yeah. Well, we have not met yet, but you work with my boss, Charlie Ramsey. Yep. Okay. Great.
Awesome. Hi, guys. I am Trisha Filippini, and I am a PhD student in educational psychology. And I hope to work with you guys at some point. I am discerning what's next for me after this degree, but one of the things I want to do, I grew up overseas, and I would love to be part of leading missions with students one day as a professor. So.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Let's get back.
My name is Vincent Hartsfield. I'm the recovery director for Mission Waco. Been with them about 24 years. We have a driving program called the Manor House, and I just want to see what we got here.
Okay, thank you.
I'm John Hunt. I work for Buckner International and do church engagement for them in Central Texas.
Thank you. Let's go to the back row.
I'm Brian Varnkamp. I work with SIL Global and Wycliffe Bible Translators. Have served in mostly Asia for 37 years, and live with Jimmy and Janet. And so don't need to say more.
Good. Glad you're here.
My name is Charlotte Milligan, graduate of Truett many years ago, but I have been, since then, worked with inner city kids in Jackson, Mississippi, and then the past 14 years I've been working at First Baptist McKinney, north of Dallas, and I am in between ministry positions right now, and have kept in touch with Jimmy, considering going back into the nonprofit sector. And so I saw this pop up on his Facebook, and I thought, hey, I think I'm gonna go down and check it out. So here I am.
Hi, I'm Maddie Tietze. I'm a sophomore at Baylor. I'm in the intro to ministry class right now, so I'm kind of like
Okay.
pre-ministry heading in that direction. So I'm interning with Julia Butler here at FBC Waco. So this is like brought up to me in my class, and she showed up and it's like, you can come get hours. And it was seriously, so I came by.
Yeah. Great.
Hey, I'm Cindy Wiles, and I'm the ED at Restore Hope, and we assist churches in long-term sending, and also are assisting some universities in student mobilization, and so have a lot to learn in that arena. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's a small world. Like Jimmy said earlier, it's like a homecoming, because Charlotte and I were in a small group, church small group together like 20 years. 25? Wow. You've aged. I've stayed the same.
Actually, I think it was 23.
Wow. Man, that's hard to believe. Yeah, yeah. Well, this is going to be very informal because we are a small group. We just want to share some of our kind of our challenges and where we have landed. And as Andy already mentioned, we are in different divisions, or we're in different divisions across a very large institution. And I think of it as a divine appointment that God kind of gravitated all of us together. It happened very organically, and I won't say a whole lot more than that. But it has been really fun to work with these two knuckleheads who are also very brilliant and loving and caring. And there's another person who works with us as well, but it's been fun to kind of dream together of what we can do with Baylor students and around the world. So here's a quick opinion poll, just raise of hands. How well do churches and universities prepare participants for ethical practices and cultural humility in service or missions and engagement abroad? So how many would say not well? Okay, all right. So-so. Okay. And how many do you think are rock stars? Okay, so no rock stars, so we can take that. So we're somewhere in the not so well, so-so spectrum, and I think we would probably agree with that. And we're going to be talking from a university perspective, but we are all committed at our churches as well, so we have that lens that goes for us. As well. So I'm going to turn it over to Bo and let him talk a little bit. And by the way, we are recording, so keep that in mind. So if you want to do like a photo bomb or whatever.
Saying that to both, keep that in mind.
Yeah. That is actually for me. So part of the my journey to their current position. So the fun part is we do lead 3 different teams. That all do something different abroad. And so we started talking about this, and I think this gets fleshed out. But the idea of, particularly at Baylor, where can we not only overlap, but what does it look like to do study in such a way that would be decidedly Christian? So at the end of the day, universities hand degrees out. Fair enough. Like if people didn't get degrees, we'd be in trouble. And the university model is in such a way that while they do missions, or while we may do local engagement, while we may do study abroad, we think Baylor has a unique opportunity to try to integrate all 3 in such a way that it wouldn't create unnecessary silos, particularly at a private institution where all the silos are homemade. So I had a mentor. I'm going to blame this a little bit on a mentor of mine. Although I was a pastor for 10 years, and then I was in a group called Food for the Hungry, and I was in the NGO world for 10 years, and then I sort of backdoored into higher ed about 15 years ago. And so that I felt like I've worn all the hats that were represented in the room, or at least up and down the hallway. I'm going to shamelessly summarize Stanley Hauerwas quote, and I have 2 letters and a color for a name, so I always massacre people's names. So I apologize in advance if you're if I shorten anybody's name. But I'm convinced that often our why is our how. Does that make sense? So if you understand what the why, I think we all have these separate discussions, and Simon Sinek made it famous with a book, but if you understand your why, then your how is embedded in that. So here's a little bit fleshed out from what Stanley says. So what it means then is our narrative over abstraction, meaning ethics is just as much a story as it is a system. So if we were going around, and we may do this a little bit later, but if you're going around and saying, why do you do what you do? You're going to give me probably a story before you give us the structure or the system, right? And story is our native language, right? When I went, my wife was recently traveling to see her parents who live in Arizona, and when she came home, she told me stories. She didn't break out into song, which she has a good voice, that'd be great. She didn't recite a poem, not Aesop's fables or quick, proverbs. That our native tongue really is story. So I think that matters. Our community over individualism, we're bad at this in the U.S. We struggle with this. We really prize independence over freedom. And along with that, because of individualism, and we can talk about that a little bit, but virtue over rules, and we'll talk about that in another slide, peace over power, and theology over philosophy. Ethics, I think, sometimes gets divorced from our understanding of not just faith, but our understanding that does God inform our ethic or not. All right, so that's to set up this slide. So there's a guy in Austin, Texas. He lives in Bastrop, and I massacre all the southern names. What is it, Bastrop or Bastrop? Bastrop. Did I get it right? I've been here long enough to get it right? Okay. So Ryan Holiday is his name, and he's written several bestsellers on Stoic philosophy. And it's sort of trending. So I thought it'd be really interesting because Stoics have they're known naturally as the cardinal virtues. I put Stoic virtues, but only to give a nod to Ryan, who's written a 4-book series on each of the virtues. And his last one came out a couple weeks ago on courage. But the cardinal virtues were always wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. Christian virtues, honestly, we probably boil them down to faith, hope, and love. So the driving virtue and driving ethic, when we talk about ethical engagement abroad, I want to make the case that part of our driving thing is similar to what Tom said in the plenary, that it is sacrificial love. Now let's go back to Becky's poll. What do you think, by default, what is the driving force for most people when they go abroad? A very dramatic air conditioner. Experience? Yeah, the driving force may be some experience for themselves.
Right.
What else?
Saving soul.
Say that louder.
Saving soul.
Saving souls. So the driving force may be conversions or sharing the gospel in some capacity.
Passion and love is a combination.
Yeah. Then you agree. You were nodding.
She said compassion, is that what she
Yeah.
said? Yes.
So guilt. What's I've actually heard that a lot. Guilt's a great starter and a bad sustainer. Fair enough? So it's a great, it does get you started a lot of times. We've had lots and lots of fitness programs start January 1st through the 3rd, right? Then about week 3, that guilt wears off and it's over. Other driving virtues. So keep that in mind. I want to say that the Christian one typically is either in obedience or sacrificial love of some kind. View of good and evil is out there, and then an ethical outlook, which we will flesh out as to how we ended up sort of collaborating on things. But let me hand it over to Andy, and we will start to hopefully see as we connect these dots a little bit.
So one of the things that I really enjoy about working with students is, and particularly enjoy working at a place like Baylor where we get to think holistically about formation of people. But one of the things that I like to do in working with students is ask students continually to attend to 4 questions. And it's something that I myself try to practice as well. But I ask students continually to attend to 4 questions. Number 1, what am I learning? And that's a natural question to ask in a context where someone is a student, right? I mean, they're a student, presumably. That ought to be a sort of driving force in what they're doing. What am I learning? Number 2, what am I doing? What are the ways that I'm spending my time and my effort and my energy? 3, as a result of what I'm learning and what I'm doing, who am I becoming? And that's maybe a slightly deeper question that sort of gets at what Bo was talking about with these virtues, that partly by what I know and partly by what I do, I become a kind of person, perhaps one marked by faith and hope and love and courage and temperance and all the rest. There are a wide range of virtues. But then number 4, I think those 3 questions are great ones. What am I learning? What am I doing? Who am I becoming? Great for us always to be attending to those. But number 4 is a question of toward what ends? And I think that's a bit of this sort of getting into the why and the how that Bo was mentioning, that when our why, when our toward what end takes a certain shape, that will in turn inform the kind of ways in which we are doing that. And the reason I mention that is that I think often we are in when we're sort of busy people about the business of doing our work, whether that's working with students, working with churches, working with doing things like are sort of on theme here of sending people to do things. We often get so kind of caught up in the mechanics of what we're doing and the logistics of what we're doing and the sort of dailiness of the work that I think often we neglect these sort of broader sets of questions that really ought to, these are the sort of important but not urgent questions sometimes, right? We sort of live in the tyranny of the urgent, the tasks that need to be done that sometimes prevent us from asking the most important kinds of questions. And one of the things that I have appreciated about working with my colleagues over here is that we've been able to try to take a step back as we think about the different ways that we are working with students at a pivotal point in their lives and in their development to sort of think about the ways that we aren't just saying, go to class, go abroad, go serve, but that we're actually sort of nesting that within a broader set of questions that I think are important questions. And as we think about those questions, what am I learning, what am I doing, who am I becoming, and toward what ends, one of the things that we have enjoyed learning about together is that as we engage with the world that exists beyond us, there are some important ethical considerations that need to be taken into account as we recognize the humanity of those with whom we engage. And so one of the things that we have begun to do is as we mentioned, we sort of work in different spaces, but are about some of the same things of recognizing that education in a classroom is important, but education in a classroom is often incomplete. That some of the real important education happens out in the world, the ways that we're carrying from the classroom to the world and carrying from the world back into the classroom. And as we've done that, as we've begun to sort of think together about some of these ways and ways that we can bring some coherence to that, we've really enjoyed the chance to engage around a sort of set of ideals that we have sort of joined into a broader conversation around something called community-based global learning. And there are a lot of words on the page here, but this is sort of, academics are famous for kind of coming up with terms and trying to define these terms. Community-based global learning is a term that was developed by academics and researchers who are also practitioners, people doing sort of what we do, and defined as a set of kind of practical ways of engaging with the world. community-based global learning is built around some ideals that in our engagement with the world, it is not about us going and telling others what they need, but rather it is, in a much more hospitable stance, responding to what someone says they might need. It is also built on cultural humility. We talk often about cultural competence. We talk little about cultural humility, about this sort of stance that says, I have a lot to learn from you. I'm not here just to teach you or tell you what you need, but I'm here to learn from you. And by leading with a posture of humility, there is, I think, a step toward mutuality, a step toward reciprocity, a step toward a more ethical, mutually beneficial kind of engagement. Community-based global learning is also a recognition that we are citizens of a big world, that we are part of this kind of global interdependence, that the world is not as big as we sometimes make it out to be. It is built around a continuous and diverse form of critically reflective practice. I mentioned these questions that we're continually having students attend to. What am I learning? What am I doing? Who am I becoming? Toward what end? This reflective practice is we think, essential to a kind of ethical engagement, a continued attendance to sort of making sense of the ways that we are interacting with the world around us. It also requires an ongoing attention to things like power and privilege and positionality, recognizing that we all inhabit different spaces, and because of the stations we inhabit, the world is different for us than it is for someone else, and it's different for someone else than it is for yet another person in a different place. And so this continual effort to try and recognize the ways that the structures of the world impact us all differently. It is also, community-based global learning is also about a deliberate and a demonstrable learning. It is this kind of connected to this posture of humility, is this posture of learning. That I'm not going, again, to tell you what you need. I'm going to learn with you and learn from you. And that in that sort of mutual interdependence, there might be sort of new forms of mutual understanding that can take shape. Community-based global learning is also, we believe, safe and transparent. And I want to get to that here with this next slide. Many of you may have heard the term like fair trade to talk about coffee or chocolate or all sorts of different things. Through this sort of network of folks that we interact with out in the world around these themes of community-based global learning, we've also kind of really taken to a term called fair trade learning. And it's similar to fair trade chocolate, fair trade coffee, fair trade all the other things. But fair trade learning is built out of some of these principles and ideals that were on the last slide about community-based global learning. And so some of this is maybe a little bit repetitive, but I think something about that term fair trade learning tends to stick with folks. It sticks with me. It's less of a mouthful than community-based global learning. So I just want to sort of articulate this in a slightly different way. Fair trade learning is built on the idea that when we are engaging with people, and in this case we're talking about students and faculty members and staff members at Baylor who are engaging with people out in the world, we believe there ought to be a fair and equitable exchange between us and those with whom we are engaging. So in this sense, as I mentioned before, projects ought to be community-driven. It ought to be responding to what someone tells you they need and what someone invites you to participate in. It is not this sense of, I must go and fix this. I must go and tell you what you need. I must go and save you. It is rather sort of flipping that around and saying, what do you need that I might be able to join you in doing? We also believe in the practice of fair trade learning that caring should be credible. And here's what we mean. Often, I think, in our
efforts to go into a place and do good, we often think that we are more capable than we really are to do that good. I am not, and you don't want me to be, a licensed healthcare professional. I should not be going and giving someone, providing healthcare, because I don't have the credibility or the capability to do that. And fair trade learning sort of proceeds on this ideal that professional standards ought to drive the ways we engage with people beyond us, that we always have an eye toward protecting and caring for the interests of persons who are vulnerable when we are in these situations of differentiated power or differentiated privilege in our engagement with the world beyond us. We also believe in fair trade learning that partnerships are capital conscious, that when there is money changing hands, when there are different other forms of capital that are sort of changing hands, that we ought to be transparent with what that looks like, that we ought to be using the resources we have to invest in the places where we serve and engage. And we also ought to be honoring the time and the effort of those with whom we partner. Often when we go and work with a global NGO or a local nonprofit here in town, that actually comes, we think we're doing it so we can do good, but it comes at a cost to those with whom we partner. And so fair trade, like proceeding on a fair trade, really takes into account the ways that it takes somebody's time when they could be doing something else, when they could be raising more funds for their organization, or doing other things that we ought to recognize in our partnership. When we can, we ought to sort of do the best we can to account for that, and to make sure that we are conscious of those things. Fair trade learning also, again, as I've said, proceeds on this assumption that learning is mutual, that just because I might be, going here to serve alongside you, I also have something to learn from you. I'm not just here to give. I'm not just here to teach. I'm not just here to show you something. You also are an expert on things that I'm not an expert on. And so there ought to be this mutual interdependence. Finally, last two bullets here on fair trade learning. In this way of engagement, we believe that work contributes to larger, sustainable goals and the flourishing of all parties and communities in this. Too often, we see that we sort of think of fair trade learning as I was using this term with Bo earlier. Sometimes I think of fair trade learning as sort of being in this Goldilocks position. I think sometimes, on the one hand, when people go to serve, they go to tell someone what they need, and I'm going to meet your needs. On the other hand, we see often ways of going out into the world that are simply extracting, that are taking from people instead of giving. Fair trade learning is a sort of middle way here, this Goldilocks way of saying that we are mutually interdependent, and that when we do that, we are about your flourishing and my flourishing. And this idea, Robin Wall Kimmerer, indigenous thinker, says all flourishing is mutual. And I've always loved that phrase, that I don't flourish without you flourishing. Right? This is kind of we hear this theme in Dr. King. Injustice everywhere is anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. It's the same idea that when we are in this interaction, when we are engaging, when I am serving you, it is I'm serving with you. That your flourishing is deeply connected to my flourishing, and vice versa. And so finally, in this way of thinking, in this way of engagement, we believe that all parties ought to feel like the terms and the exchanges are fair. And that requires communication, right? That requires ways of thinking together about what are the shared goals of this engagement. And that relates back to some of this transparency. It relates back to some of these sort of capital conscious ways of thinking. So these are some of the kind of guiding ideals that we've tried to share. Again, as we've mentioned, we sort of work across different spaces, work with different populations of students, even though they overlap. But as we've tried to think about that, as we try to say, there's really something good about sending our students out into the world to learn and to engage and to serve. we believe those are good things, but we want to develop some frameworks that can help us think about how we might do that in the best ways, how we might do that ethically. So that these questions of what our students are learning, what they're doing, who they're becoming, and toward what ends are ends that we can believe in, are ends that we think lead to this kind of broader way of flourishing together. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Becky to...
Dr. Hoke, is
Yeah.
that, the term fair trade learning, is that in literature? Is that something
It
you
is.
guys have?
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. So we'll actually point you to, we actually are, Baylor is a sponsoring member of something called the Community-Based Global Learning Collaborative, which has published something called a Fair Trade Learning Toolkit. It's a bunch of case studies and ways of sort of thinking about some of these questions. And so we've been in a broader conversation with a number of institutions and thinking about what that looks like. We're continually, in some ways Baylor's a different type of institution than a lot of our peer institutions in this network. And so for us, these are sort of deeply Christian ways of thinking about that mutuality, about that shared flourishing. So we sort of maybe put a slightly different spin on, or at least have it emerge from a slightly different place. But we think a lot of the kind of toolkit and the ways of practice around that have been very helpful. And it's a kind of grassroots network of institutions that are trying to build these tools together and think together about some of these ways of being. Yeah, thanks for that question. All right. Hand it to you, Becky.
So we wanted to just kind of talk as a panel as well as kind of how this got started and the implications of it, what this means within our academic institution, but also how this might work out in churches and in communities. So as I said, I'm the Assistant Dean of Spiritual Life. I have, except for 1.5 years at Baylor, have always worked within university ministries or spiritual life. So I'm also an ordained minister, and so I come from it both as academic and as a minister, which I would argue that they do too. But they have other credentials that I don't have. So let me talk a little bit like from the ministry side of it for a moment, and give you just a little bit of historical context about missions at Baylor. So I oversee the Department of Missions, Service, and Public Life, which we like to use long terms at universities. So I don't know what that's about. But what that essentially means is we mobilize students to do mission experiences, local service here in Waco, and then what is public life is how do you work out your faith in the public square? What does that look like? So fair trade could be one of those examples. Bless you. So when I began as the department head of missions, it was just me and an assistant. That was in 2006, and it was very young at the university. The Department of Missions was very young, only like 5 years old. So the first thing I had to figure out is, what does missions look like within the context of higher education? It's not the local church, and we're not a substitute for the local church. It's not a mission sending agency, which we have plenty of people here from mission sending agencies. It's also not humanitarian aid, like hands-on, although we do hands-on service. So kind of had to figure out what we were not before we could figure out what we were. So within academia, missions at Baylor is what we call discipline-specific missions. So this understanding of helping students. Our mission of the university is to educate men and women for worldwide leadership and service, and it goes on from there. But worldwide leadership and service. So what does that look like for Monday through Friday, students going to class? How are they going to live out their faith? And then what does that mean for their vocation? So really it was about vocation and calling, which was why the Department of Missions began. So within that, I wish I had had those two slides that Andy just showed you when I first started this, because I did not. And so when we began to send out students, I learned quickly a lot of those things that Andy said we try not to do, we were doing, right? We were saying, oh, we're here to fix you. We're the great American saviors. We're taking, not giving. And so early on, as we began to have those, or as I began to, and I began to build my team, it became apparent to us that we needed some guiding principles. So we used terms like reciprocity. We used terms like cultural respect and humility. We use things like respecting the local community leaders, whether that was a church or a nonprofit or another university. And now you'll hear us use, as a university, you hear us use the language of virtues. So kind of same context, just different terms. So as a university, we are using the language of virtues in almost every aspect of the institution, or at least trying to. That's our goal, right? So again, I wish I had had that list to go on, that we could say as we send out students, we're going with this in mind. But now we do have those guiding principles, those virtues, that when we send students out, and when I say we send students out, this year we'll send out 33 different teams to about 16 different countries around the world, nearly 400 participants. That's students and their faculty leaders, so they're led by faculty within their discipline, most of them, or staff. From my perspective, and how we carry that out as the church, is we're helping our students understand what it means to live out your faith through your chosen career. So a lot of what I do is either co-curricular or extracurricular. So how this came about, working with Bo and Andy, first of all, I just knew them. I was on Bo. I always joke that if you like Bo, great, I was on his search committee. If you don't like Bo, I'm sorry, I was on his search committee, right? And then Andy and I have known each other since we were at church together at Calvary many, many years ago. The reason why we kind of started working together as the university, I think, began to start looking at ethical practices as we take students out into the local community. Bo, of course, is all about global engagement. Andy started more with community development and helping students do work within Waco. But I think one of the reasons why we gravitated toward each other, not only because we know each other and most of the time we like each other, but also we kind of saw this need to, hey, you know what? Why are we duplicating? So higher ed is notorious for silos. I don't know, in your church and in your church community, do you work with other churches? Some, maybe. I don't know. The church I go to, we love other churches, but for the most part, we're just blowing and going with our own things. So rarely do we collaborate. Same thing at a campus, on a campus. So we began just having conversation. We were on different committees over the years. I can't tell you how many manuals that Andy and I have worked on throughout the years that just is collecting dust on a shelf somewhere where we're going to do this together, and it just never went anywhere. But finally, we just got to a place where, like, you know what? We want to do something greater than what we can do in our own area. So by working together and bringing, I mean, you can just tell by the way we talk and by the things that we share. we come at things from different angles. We also have different networks around the university and different assets that we bring to the table. And so as we began to start thinking about that work together, like what can Andy and OEL, the Office of Engaged Learning, bring? What can Bo with the Center for Global Engagement bring? What can I from Mission Service and Public Life bring to the table? We began to see a much larger picture and a way to work together to streamline the lessons that we're teaching our students so that I'm not over here teaching one thing, which is very similar to what Bo's teaching, to what Andy's teaching, but we're all going down this path together. And that's how the beauty of this all kind of started, is it was very organic. But as we started thinking about it, it really is an asset to the university that we work together, because we can leverage resources, but also we have the same vernacular. We have this same desire for our students. I think it was Bo that was saying our why or our how is embedded in our why. So if we're about educating men and women for worldwide leadership and service, we're now on this trajectory of how we're doing it, which is much stronger than we were when we were in 3 different silos. So, I don't know, I'll feel like I'm kind of rambling now, but that's kind of how we began this whole work together. And so it became an idea. But as we started bringing in a couple of other people like-minded with us, it was like the light bulb went off, and it was a kind of a no-brainer. Like, why would we not be doing this? And so the question I would pose to you is I'm about to turn it back over to Bo, is if Lakeshore Baptist is where I go, if Lakeshore Baptist is doing this one thing and Calvary's doing this one thing and St. Albans is doing this one thing, I'm just naming churches in Waco, then why are we not trying to do this together? And I will say, my last thing I'll say is, I don't know about churches. Well, I do know about churches, but universities can be very competitive within themselves. Hence the silos. You're going after the same funding, you're kind of working with the same people, you're going after the same resources. But once we began to see that, you know what, this is not about building our own kingdoms. This is about helping our students grow and building a kingdom for the kingdom. I think that's when the barriers began to break down. And so my question would be posed to you is, what churches in your community might you begin to start reaching out to? Is there a way for you to partner together and to create some of these ethical practices as you reach your local community and across the globe? I'm going to turn it over to Bo to kind of share his experience with this.
So you tell me, what's the stereotype of study abroad?
Say that again.
The stereotype of study abroad. When I say the phrase study abroad, what comes to mind?
Go do a little bit of studying and a lot of sightseeing.
Right, selfies at the Eiffel Tower, right? And or like really cool stories or trips. We'll even call them. There's actually a school out east that won't allow study abroad to use the phrase trip, because they're really trying to push back on it. How many actually here did study abroad? All right, 90% of the U.S. students do not. So there are different barriers on that. So we have north of 70 programs on north of 50 countries on 6 continents, and we send about 1,100 students abroad for Baylor. And one of the questions Becky and I have been asking since we met is, how come missions and study abroad don't go to the same places? Because if it's worldwide leadership and service, we have a lot of people trying to do things, but we're also we're running into each other constantly. We've since been able to travel together. And that, I think, is part of the conversation of at least Study Abroad Office participation in it, is to try to say, if the stereotype is that people are taking selfies at the Eiffel Tower, and I'm not trying to pick on the French. I actually like Paris, and we have a really cool site in Aix-en-Provence. So since this is being recorded, everybody should go there. But I think the idea that we do this a lot, don't we? We don't even do this individually. We are consistently trying to separate things when they should be put together. And one of the surprises coming from a large state institution was that if the vision is worldwide leadership and service, somehow we separated out study abroad and missions, and service for that matter. And we're trying to figure out how, if you come to Baylor, part of the value proposition is maybe integrating those. And I want to also jump off of something that Andy brought up. I think the motivation, at least from a study abroad perspective, that in terms of not just joining forces, but trying to figure out how we do this together, is that we spend a lot of time on, and this is his 4 questions, a lot of time on what we should do, get from here to there, right? And then all the logistics that go there. And anybody, if you've ever taken 20 18 to 22-year-olds through the airport, that's a thing in itself. Or through security, or you're constantly looking around, you're like, oh, we're not going to make that train with this group. So you're quickly trying to divide up who's going to be left, who's going to divide up into different groups, right? And you go, who should be left behind? No, I'm kidding. We don't do that. Not at Baylor anyway. But the idea that what we should be doing is we spend a lot of time on what we're learning. We spend a lot of time on. That's the study part of study abroad. So we have classes, coursework. We do degree plans. You can do a really cool experience at Oxford, St. Andrews. We have really robust partnerships. Of the top 100 research universities in the world, we have partnerships with 10 of them. So that is no small thing. Having said that, one of the things we want to start spending more time on is similar to what Andy brought up, is that third question. Who are we sending home? What type of people are now going home? Are they the type of student who is now they just added to their consumer habits that they now buy stuff from around the world? Are they just more educated consumers? Or are they actually consuming less because they want to give more, or that kind of thing? So I don't want to gloss over. That is a really fundamentally important question to, I think, me personally and professionally at this point is, let me put I'm a parent of 2 college students. My son got back from Moldova a few months ago, and my daughter got back from Africa. And yeah, leave it to the study abroad director to send them off to the weird places, right? But they went on their own. We had the questions when they come back, and the stories, though, were very fundamentally different than the folks that wanted to go to and you could guess, right? The top places for U.S. students are England, Italy, and Spain in that order. And a lot of it is because we look at it through a lens of saying, well, what is the experience I want to be for me? And I'm going to hand it back to Andy, and because I think our office kept saying, well, we aren't measuring, we're considered successful if we send a bunch of people abroad. But we need to drive it deeper, and those third and fourth questions are really important. Who are we sending home? And are we successful for sending thousands of students abroad, or what if we are just actually doing more harm? Or maybe we are successful, but how do we create programming then that allows us to send different people home in such a way? So I'm going to tag it back to Andy to pick up from there.
Yeah, and I'll be brief so that we can have some dialogue together. So one of the things that ended up happening, actually, sitting in a conference room, chewing over these themes, the 3 of us and one other person, ended up sort of recognizing that because of the ways that we're structured, even though we sort of want to share in these ideals, even though we want to get out of the business of dividing and you know, sort of and competing, and get into the business of collaborating, we recognized there were some kind of structural hurdles to how we might do that. And so as we began to think about how to problem solve around these things and recognize that we want maybe less of the study tourism and more of the ways of kind of deepening our impact in places in ways that might be that might allow us not just to consume but to serve, that might allow us to serve in relationship. One of the things we recognized is it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that unless we invest in some structural forms, some institutional forms that allow us to stay in some places, to build lasting and durable relationships in those places, that allow us to learn from people and give to people as well in ways that are reciprocal and mutual. And so some of what has emerged from that is something that we have called global hubs at Baylor, and it's something that we're, the three of us and a few others are in the process of trying to build right now, which is to build some durable, sustainable, relationship-based ways of being in a place so that it actually matters we were there. That it matters not just because we had a great experience, but that it matters because we are in relationship that might bring about some of that mutual flourishing that we've discussed. And I think that's been maybe a surprising thing, and it's a challenging thing, and you know, we all know about institutional inertia sometimes. It's hard to create new things sometimes. And yet what we've recognized is that because of the ways that we are, you know, committed to some of these shared ideals and committed to sort of doing engagement in the world in ethical ways and in ways that are maybe different from, I love Bo's term he often uses, like the currency in study abroad is often noses and nickels. How many people can we send abroad and how much revenue can we generate from that? And it's like, that's just not the right set of questions. It's not noses and nickels. It's about this sort of deeper way of being in a place and impacting in a place and being impacted by that place. And so, you know, for us, it's sort of resulted in what feels like a, well, Becky tells us she has a retirement date picked out. So we'll do it in the amount of time Becky's got left.
4 years, 2 months, and
All right, I was going to say it's a decade project, but it's a 4-year, 2-month project before Becky retires, where we're building out some of these hubs that are places around the globe where we have this sustained way of being, so that we might be part of learning and serving and giving and receiving in those places that will have lasting impact. So with that, we would like to just sort of think about together, you know, how might we, I'm told them I'm very fond of the how might we question. How might you better ensure ethical practices abroad? How will we know we're doing it? So these are not hypotheticals. We'd love, and I'm going to, maybe I could pull up that other chair and just sit so this is not a person standing and speaking to you, but so that this can sort of turn into just a bit of dialogue and reflective dialogue. So in response to these questions, or if you have questions for us or for one another, we're happy to kind of continue the conversation in thinking about these things. Yeah, if we have some things to capture, I'm always a teacher, so I'm always glad to capture those on board.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you tell us where the global hubs are?
We did not. So the first, we're looking at building out 3 of these. One will be in Latin America somewhere. We're just talking about this today. We're actually, one will be in Rome, and one will be somewhere in Asia or Africa, and those are big places. We're sort of doing the discerning work to figure out where there is interest and demand and opportunity, and you know, kind of proceeding in ways that we described with Fair Trade Learning, where it is we are invited to a place. We are not going to tell a place.
Are those hubs tied to other academic institutions, or are they tied to other types of organizations?
Yes. So a little bit of both is the way that those are being built out. Because these will, you know, we didn't go into a lot of detail about what these hubs will look like, but they're places of learning. So there will be study abroad programs that are there, and those will take different shapes. But embedded in those are also opportunities for service, you know, kind of with local partners, local NGOs. but also some internship opportunities for our students as well. Also, some research opportunities, so some connections there. So there's some strategy to where we're building those out. We want them, in sort of different, diverse geographic types of places, but in ways that we hope can sort of build on all of those things that are true to who we are as an academic institution. We want our students to be learning, and we want them to get the professional experience they need, and we want them to be serving, and so we're looking at places that can do all of those things.
So we do have an intern in Rome as we speak, and then we will have,
Leo, is that Leo?
as a what?
Is that Leo?
He's interning for us right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we got plans for him
He
another
wears his
day.
Baylor jersey.
Yeah.
Just check.
So but then starting in January, we will have students, and this is actually, everything is being launched as we speak. The thing I want to write on some of the footnote, both Becky and Andy said from different angles though, and I'd be curious of what y'all thought. We laugh a lot because word has sort of gotten out that we're doing this, because we represent 3 different teams that are on 3 different parts of the university. And so we all sort of will, this isn't not necessarily something the university told us to do. But here's the funny part. Everybody now that hears about it really wants, they want in. And they're like, well, what do you guys do? And so there is, if you hear stories that it's like somehow already built and we own property in Rome, that's not true. But we've heard different versions of like, oh, how do we get to be part of something? Because I do think there is a desire for people to feel like they're part of something and not by themselves.
Let me say 2 things. One just about the Rome piece of this. The other, I neglected to mention this. Rome is, globally, is a center for, it's the World Food Program of the UN is in Rome. The Food and Agriculture Program of the UN is in Rome. And we have partnerships established with those. So that's part of why we're doing that, is there's sort of global humanitarian impact that happens in that place that also happens to be a great place to visit. And so that's part of the strategy with that. And we have one of our intern right now is at the World Food Program, she's at FAO, at Food and Agriculture organization there right now. The other piece of that is that I lost my train of thought. Something about building out the hub. Oh, one of the things that we're trying to do in creating these hubs is to create these economies of scale where we're just sort of building some infrastructure that different people from around our university can sort of tap into that in different ways. They don't have to invent the wheel themselves, right? That we're building some permanent infrastructure that allows for sort of easier ways of doing some things so that, every individual faculty member that wants to have a program in Rome doesn't have to build it from scratch, but can sort of tap into what's already on offer there. So it's another part of why that is proving to be a strategy that people want in on, to Bo's point.
And also, let me add that the hubs are not the only place that Baylor will be sending students, right? So the idea of creating hubs is that we can go deeper on these things that we just talked about, because we are educating our students and our faculty and staff who will be engaged about these ethical practices. So we'll be doing, well, I'm kind of answering the second question, we'll be doing assessment, evaluation to see what are people getting from this. Not only our students, but the community involved.
Go back to the formative experience at Baylor itself prior to being deployed on either a short-term type of encounter, or I can imagine for the ones that you are sending to study abroad, there's a good bit of formative experience that goes with that and a lot of guidelines. But for the shorter-term types of engagement the university is doing, what are the forms for formation itself that are preparing these students for that? Can you kind of just give me broad?
Yes, absolutely. So we used to, before COVID, we had in-person trainings for our students that would go out. We'd have one big, that's what you're talking about. How do we train them? How do we ensure
Instilling these values, yes.
Yeah. So our department will train our faculty and staff leaders. So they have different topics on some of these virtues, as well as just if a student loses a passport, what do you do? So there's the practical, and then there's the praxis and the theory. Now we use Canvas, so it's our university platform for classroom, digital classroom. So Andy has a Canvas page for whatever class he teaches. And so the same thing for our students who apply and are accepted to a mission trip. So they have a Canvas page for the nursing team that's going to the Dominican Republic. And so they are required to read specific articles. They are required to sign off on specific trainings that they've done, that we train. And then they have in-person meetings with their faculty and staff leaders. So we're training the trainers, and then the trainers go and train the students. Some of our faculty and staff are just, they come to us already very well trained and experienced on leading mission trips. And some just think, I want to do good with my talents and time. So we have a mix, but everyone goes through the same training. Great question. And then we do assessment. So going back to how will we know? So we do assessment and evaluation with all
Prior
our
to
students.
deployment or after?
Both. Yeah, pre and post. Yeah.
I want to propose one answer to the first question and partly the second question. From my experience, you just need good relationships with the national people that you're working with. And that when I say good, honest relationships, that they will tell you the honest answer and not just what they think you want to hear. But they're the number one thing that will tell you if you're being ethical about what you're doing. That would be one way you can do it. And you can ask them, are we doing it?
Which ironically is how the whole fair trade learning toolkit started, is because their partner, it actually was based in Jamaica at the time, their partner in Jamaica said, enough, we don't want any more American teams coming. They're calling a timeout, we appreciate things, but this isn't working for us.
Yeah, that's great.
And led to a deeper dialogue, because they had the transparency to be able to say, yeah, this is not for us, we don't need US teams from this, and this particularly a school in the East Coast, but they're saying, thanks, but no thanks, because from a study abroad perspective, millions of dollars are spent on people going on study abroad, but less than 10% of the money spent stays in the community. Which is obviously very convicting for those of us who it feels like then a one-way street, which is, we think we can do better.
And how do you get to that answer? How do you find that out?
I think it's just it takes time.
Exactly.
For one thing, you can't come in 3 weeks or a short mission term and get it done, unless you have someone who's constantly going back there and has a relationship with. It takes time to develop those honest relationships, and I really like what you guys have. It's just excellent, but you learn just as much from them as they learn from you.
Exactly.
And if it's not that way, then something's wrong. And I've learned so much from
And they have to feel that that's true, right?
They have to really believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of our guiding principles that I learned early on, is a long-term commitment, which is another reason why the hub is so appealing to us, is that, again, if faculty from biology have, research in Mongolia, they'll then go, and bless you, and go and learn. But if you want to come to Rome and work with us and figure this out for the next 5 to 10 years, then not only will you be changed, but hopefully in that amount of time, the people that you're working with will also be impacted in some way, hopefully for the good. But it takes time. I've learned that. Like,
you have to commit at least 3 to 5 years until you can finally figure out what is it we're trying to do here. So,
And I think there's been a change in missions over the years. People don't want to commit their lives. They want to commit 3, 5, maybe 10 years, but they don't want to commit their lives to it. And some organizations still hope for that. But I just think that's not where missions are today. And so I think it means you have to be more intentional about what you guys are wanting to do than you had to be when you were in it for your life. Because you're there all the time. You become one of them. Well, not completely, but you have that time in those relationships. But when you have shorter term kinds of things, you have to be far more intentional, I think. So this is really good.
But I want to underline, I mean, we've sort of said this in passing, and I would be curious on how you guys navigate this, but because this is an addition to our day job, so it isn't like Baylor said we should do this. Now Baylor, I think everybody's appreciative, and now I think this is obviously something that, particularly when you say you have a Christian mission, the institution goes, yes. Okay.
So you're going to get a raise.
No. But it actually costs us more because it is, to a point, I'm a firm believer that relationships are the thing, healthy relationships are the thing that changes the world. You guys read this from Bryant Myers. He used to be at World Vision, and he had this in a book that he wrote, now at least 15 years old. But at Genesis 3, the 4 things were broken: our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with God, our relationship with others, and our relationship with the creation. And I think that what I see in the potential of the hubs is putting a lot of those back together in a way that because the focus is on healthy relationships. But it's a mess. So that's the fun part, and that's also the challenge, because we get stopped by different people on campus saying, how do we be part of it? And we're like, let us build it first. Or we don't know, or hold that thought, or there's things, or we say yes to it, but it's a messy thing. So I think my question back to you is, when we talk about ensuring ethical practices, how, maybe this is not necessarily the group part, but it's like, don't be afraid to write down the pain points of this too. Because obviously you're right here and we're gonna make it sound great and we're like, yeah, you should do it. And at the same time, you have to navigate that the pain points are worth pushing through and that they are worth it because relationships are worth it. And I wouldn't trade the time we're doing it for anything, but what I sort of look forward to is the ongoing conversations that we talked about creating. We have to create a completely different container because it doesn't naturally exist. We use the term vessel. Is that vessel?
Apparently I said it one time and Becky
liked it.
attributes it.
It actually happens a lot. If we say that, if Becky likes it, then it sticks. But but the institutions are not the fastest gun in the West.
No.
But if you don't build them, then you can't. Then it's likely not to last. So it is building a different container as well.
I think one thing that makes it hard to know is that the expectations may not be what you thought they were going to be when you started out. You have to be willing to change as you go along, and you also have to be patient. I mean, the world is wanting their results like that. I mean, it's hard even in the Bible translation world. Everyone wants to get those Bible translations done quick, and then they sit on the shelf because they didn't develop the relationships, they didn't take the time to check them, they didn't take the time to see if the community wanted it. So that's just one example, and anything like that, it takes more time than I think our quick world wants now. And so that is a challenge. That's one of the real big challenges in missions across the board, I think. Everybody wants results. Well, Jesus didn't really have really good results, did he, when he was on there? I mean, really, when you think about it. Now, but anyway, that's very, very difficult. So more power to you. Go for it.
Other questions? I know our time is almost.
Are you hoping that these hubs are a bit of a prototype to then start with these 3 and then with the hopes of adding as time and resource and
Yeah, I think we'll see. You know, we're modest in our expectation of how, you know, I mean, if part of the goal here is to deepen, you know, you don't want to end up kind of spreading yourself too wide. And so we'll sort of see, we're doing these kind of one at a time, we're phasing these. And part of the reason to start with Rome is, number one, we've got some of these partnerships at places like FAO and World Food Program, et cetera. And also there's good kind of study abroad infrastructure in Rome. We have partner universities. Like, it's, you know, sort of starting from a place of strength to build a proof of concept at a place where we've got a good bet that this could work. Before then kind of moving, you know, we're in the early sort of seed conversations of starting about how to start the second one here. I don't know, we got to get 3 of them in 4 years and 2 months. And,
I know. 4 years, 2 months, and 12 days.
all right. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see after that. We'll see.
I'm working with another university, the Baptist University, and their goal of establishing hubs right now is to establish hubs that also have church representation. In other words, are there churches, U.S. churches or local churches, that are invested in the work in which they're doing? Do you have any integration with churches in that way?
You know, I mean, partly because, as Bo was saying, like, we haven't fully built these things yet. Yes, actually.
We typically work with the local churches in that community. So, that's kind of our goal, because, again, from the work that we've been doing in missions, when you find that local church, most people in that community, the pastor is a community leader. So we work a lot with local churches to do our work. So, not necessarily U.S. churches.
Right.
Does
Yeah,
Rome have
so the short answer is yeah, but I think the challenge is the way we're trying to do it. We've seen a lot of universities either buy property or do some long-term leases. A phrase that we've been wrestling with is, how do we expand our footprint without planting flags? And which makes it even messier. So, but it is working because we have, you know, being in a place like Rome, you can point to the Notre Dame's city block that they own, or University of Arkansas, or Kent State of all places owns a really fascinating place in Florence. But we are committed to not necessarily buying up property and putting Baylor's logo, but trying to do it in a way in which we would expand our, in a sense, be values driven and not necessarily start planting flags, so you won't see a lot of green and gold on the buildings. But hopefully over time, they'll actually know who Baylor students are for the way they conduct themselves.
Sounds biblical.
So here's the toolkit. We can send these around, but if you, I don't know, do we Google?
I think Jimmy's gonna collect all the slide decks and send them out. At least that's what someone said, so. But you can also just, I think it's cbgl.org is their website, and the toolkit is on the website.
Click.
Oh, I think it is because it's not hooked up to.
Got it. Okay.
I would say, it's essentially, a lot of universities have been involved in building it. It is open source, and a lot of people have added to it over time. If you don't see anything on there, or if you see something there that's controversial or offensive, it's the ongoing dialogue that's been really helpful for us. And I think my 2 cents on, which is why the chart is, even if you don't have necessarily a toolkit, don't be afraid to build your own with other churches in your area or other organizations who are like-minded, and just kind of say, it gives you an idea. I mean, without some sort of objective framework, you will start to compete with each other, because you're trying to say, so what's driving it really is this, it is a value system for all of us. And it isn't like global engagement is saying, come along. And it's very much a difference how you invite people to your table, right? Are you inviting people to your table, or is there a table in which everybody feels like they have a seat saved for them? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we always talk about, when I was part of a church, it's very different to feel like you're ministering together rather than inviting someone to your ministry. And I think that we are trying to create a framework that, you know, radically cool thing that could happen in 5 years is other universities would also come along and maybe collaborate with some of the programs. So, we do get asked by some other institutions if they could come along on programming we've built. And hopefully, if we keep, you know, if we had this conversation a year from now, we would have stories of saying, well, we tried this, and here's how it went. And we're in the middle of we're actually trying to pilot something in Scotland that we will replicate next fall in Rome. We're working the kinks out.
We're working the kinks out.
Yep. Here's what it looks like.
Where's the toolkit?
CBGLcollab.org.
Yeah. Is the toolkit down the bottom?
It's at the top, underneath what we do, partnership for trade learning. Yeah, it used to be called Toolkit, and I don't know why they changed that label.
Cool.
See, there's a little 3-minute video about what fair trade learning is, and then I'll link to the toolkit.
But this is again one model that we're part of. If you've already a part of Network, start building your own, honestly, because it is sort of a cool way to get conversation started, and also to recalibrate when everybody's kind of like, why are we doing this again? Because this is right now it's going well, but I think that our deep concern, you know, beyond 4 years and 2 months, right, is that it's not personality driven. That's part of the new container.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thanks for a good conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Continue conversation anyway.